And welcome back to the Talking Archive. My name is Josh Jacobs, and we continue our conversation with Ed Mackay, who last we spoke was talking about his time auditioning to be the possible new announcer for The Price is Right. Now, remember when Johnny Olson passed away, I think the finalists they had as far as the announcers were concerned, they had Bob Hilton, Rich Jeffries, Gene Wood was only supposed to be there temporarily because while Wood was a good announcer, his voice just was not right for The Price is Right.
No. And Wood was not only an announcer,
mm-hmm.
and he had one heck of an audience warm up. He put together little skits with the audience. He'd bring audience people out, and they'd do all kinds of little things. But he also hosted Beat the Clock, I think.
That's right. Yeah, he took over as announcer. Well, he was originally the announcer of it when Jack Nars hosted, and then after 3 seasons, Nars resigned because it was made up in Toronto, and so Nars said I was paying more for airfare, hotel, American taxes, Canadian taxes. So basically, he was losing more money than he was actually making hosting the show, even though that was Nars' favorite show of all time. So Gene Wood, who was living in New York at the time, was much easier for him just to step into the hosting role. And the ratings were still good when it got canceled for some reason. I think Mark Goodson didn't want to do it in Canada anymore, but there was some sort of stipulation that it had to be done in Canada. I'm not sure why, but
I don't know. He did that show. On the one audition I did for Price is Right was for the nighttime version, the last nighttime version they did, and when I was doing the audition over at TV City CBS, Gene was there, and they had sort of told Gene he would probably be getting the show as the announcer. And then he and I were talking. He was not happy when they were auditioning me. I didn't get it. I didn't get it. You remember the Arsenio Hall show?
Yeah, Burton Richardson, the announcer of that, became the announcer of that. It was Doug Davidson was the host.
It was between me and Burton for the nighttime version.
Wow.
Of Price is Right, and Paramount, who was making the show, knew Burton instead of me. And so I'm told, whatever that means, that that's why Burton got it instead of I got it, instead of me getting it. So
and then, ironically, after Rod Roddy died, Burton Richardson and Randy West were switching off every other week as announcers until they finally hired Rich Fields to be the new announcer.
Right, and like they say, they had a bunch of auditions. They would bring somebody on for a week, like Jim Thornton. He was on for a week, they hired Rich, and I think Rich lasted 2 seasons.
Well, actually,
something
2
like
seasons
that.
with Barker, and then 3 with Drew, and he was let go in 2010 because
did he?
Said
okay.
they wanted.
All right.
They said they wanted a more comedic announcer to be Drew Carey's new announcer, which didn't make much sense to me because Drew was supposed to be the funny guy, and I thought the announcer was supposed to be the straight guy. So they got George Gray, who had hosted the syndicated version of The Weakest Link, as the
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so he was actually like George Gray's Weakest Link host better than Ann Robinson because he was more goofy and stuff. It was more personable. Well, Ann Robinson was so robotic, and he's like, what do you do? I do impersonations. Who do you impersonate? Ann Robinson. And so this contestant did an Ann Robinson impression. And George Gray said, "I'm going to get a beer. You take over the rest of the show."
Well, I got to tell you, I watch that show every morning. Price is Right, and I think Drew has owned that show. I didn't think at first he was going to, but I think they were trying to make him into another Bob Barker. And Drew finally, in my opinion, and whether I'm right or not, I don't know, finally said, you know what? I don't mind being overweight. I don't mind leisure suits, and I don't mind tennis shoes.
Or wearing a beard.
Yeah, you know, and George Gray, I got to tell you, he really is good on that show. He can be on stage and still do his job. Mm-hmm. He surprises me, only because when I was doing that stuff, I couldn't do it without a script. Now I'm pretty sure they have cue cards for him.
Yeah,
but he is so smooth and seamless and has a good time. I think he's an asset to that show. I really do.
They've kind of used him now as an on-air sidekick more than just announcer, but kind of like, you know, the on-screen sidekick, which, you know, kind of in the vein of Monty Hall, Jay Stewart type of approach.
Yeah, Jay Stewart, yes. Jay Stewart, when Let's Make a Deal stopped production, was my game show host. Game show agent.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and for a little while. Mm-hmm. But Jay was good. Jay, but he very seldom did anything where you could see him announcing without a cue card or something.
That's right. Yeah.
Where George, you know, he could stand there on, you know, any kind of piece of equipment or walking around. He really does a great job. I think the announcer for Let's Make a Deal, what's his name?
Jonathan Mangum.
He came out. Yeah, he came out of what? Whose line is it anyway? I think.
Yeah, he and Wayne Brady were connected that way as well as I think the comedy circuit.
So of course was Kerry. Mm-hmm. I think he does a good job as well. And going back to your, you know, sidekick thing, I think everybody on Price is Right has become almost a sidekick. The girls don't just wave their hands around anymore.
No,
they're allowed to talk. They're allowed to have a good time. The addition to the guys, that was brilliant.
Oh yeah, because
it really was. I didn't like it at first because I like looking at beautiful women. But it's brilliant, and they're all mic'd. They can all talk. They all have a great time, and I think that improved the show.
Yeah, and the thing was that the male model added to that, because I remember Rich Fields told the story that before Drew Carey officially got the job, it was kind of down to 3 different people. It was down to George Hamilton, Mark Steinis from Entertainment Tonight, and Todd Newton, who had hosted Hollywood Showdown and Whammy, the all-new Press Your Luck. And I was rooting for Newton initially, and then there was a wrench suddenly thrown. Oh, Rosie O'Donnell's in the running for it. But the thing was that Rosie O'Donnell said, well, I want to move the show to New York, which was a non-star. They said, no, we're not going to move it to New York. And so she said, well, here's what we'll do. We'll have me fly out here once a month, and over a 4-day period, we'll tape 5 shows a day. But with Price is Right, you get all those props and all those prizes. The crew gets there about 8:30 in the morning. They don't actually start taping till about 1 o'clock. It was actually when they let their first audience in. So the maximum they can do per day is 2 shows. So if she did it that way, you'd have to have a crew around the clock, and she wouldn't get any sleep for the next 4 days. I think basically what it really boiled down to was she wanted too much money. Kind of like a couple years before that, Monty Hall was all set on hiring her for a primetime version of Let's Make a Deal for NBC. And Monty later told Steve Beverly of the TVGameShows.net website, he said O'Donnell just simply wanted too much money and wasn't willing to negotiate for, like, you know, increases as ratings went well. Plus, you know, the thing is that a lot of people say she's difficult to work with. And so That wouldn't have been a good fit. And plus, Richfield said she wanted to get rid of all the female models, have nothing but male models, and she wanted to reduce the number of pricing games from 6 to 4 in order to be able to have more banter. But the contestants want to win some prizes, and to reduce that chance would have been terrible.
It's a contestant show. It's not a host show.
No.
And can you imagine? I mean,
I can't imagine. And
can you imagine George Hamilton?
I know. You'd have to have you'd have to have a tanning bed in back.
He's on some kind of Home Depot or something, a paint something commercial now, and he's ancient.
Well, Hamilton and Gray are. I've got this theory that famous guys named George are unique characters. There's nobody else like them. Yeah. George Hamilton, George Gray, George Burns, George Putnam, Dr. George Fishbeck, George Jefferson, George Jetson, George of the Jungle, Georgie Jessel, George Burns, George Zimmer from the Men's Warehouse, I guarantee it, George Kennedy, George Lopez, Jorge Ramos, George Alexander Trebek, George Robert Newhart.
It's funny. I worked with Dennis James at one point.
Mm-hmm.
When I was doing television audio. He did men's clothing, like the Men's Warehouse.
Wow.
Yeah, and his tagline is, "Okay."
Oh, okay.
And we'd set him in front of a green screen, and put. And for those of you who aren't sure what a green screen means, when you're watching the weather, the weatherman is actually standing in front of a green drape. And the people in the booth, the television people, they put a picture behind them so that you see the temperatures and stuff like that. Well, we used to put a rack of clothes behind him. We had one that he was standing next to, and a clothing store right behind it. And we would spend 6 hours doing, 8 or 10 commercials for a particular nationwide clothing store. And again, it was, and Dennis was fun to work with. He really was. I miss him on game shows because he did quite a few.
I remember watching him on the nighttime Price is Right as a kid. So daytime I'd watch Barker, nighttime it was kind of funny. The same set, same announcer, same models, just a different host.
Yeah, no, I remember. But he did a couple other shows too.
That's right. Yeah, my dad was on his version of Name That Tune back in 1974. The funny thing is that my dad scored like 79 out of 80 tunes correct on the test, which was more than anybody had. But the producers, like Ralph Edwards Productions, wanted my dad to cut his hair because he had really long, almost Howard Stern-like hair back then. So he puts it
you.
Like me, yeah, exactly. Even more fro-y, if you can imagine. And so my dad wore bobby pins. They said, get a haircut. Then he put on this tacky wig. They said, get a haircut. So he got 2 haircuts. And at the time, all you had to do was just name a simple tune like She Loves You by the Beatles to get on stage. But they gave my dad this really difficult tune. And he's like, anybody know what this is? And they were like, no. And so Dennis said, Daryl Jacobs, stand up and name that tune. And my dad said, I haven't a clue. And so somebody else happened to know it. But my dad said the worst thing was being able to name the tunes before either contestant hit the buzzer. But I found out later on that Lynn Boleyn, who was the head of NBC daytime programming, which Dennis James's version of Name That Tune was on, wanted Dennis to wear his hair longer and to don bell-bottoms and leisure suits. So I think it's hilarious that NBC wanted the host of that show to wear his hair longer. Yeah, the producers of the show wanted my dad, a contestant, to wear his hair shorter. I told that story to Brad James, Dennis's youngest son, a couple of years ago, and he got a kick out of that. In fact, there's actually a biography a friend of mine wrote a couple of years ago. His name is Adam Needif. He's written books on Bill Cullen, Gene Rayburn, Alan Ludden. His Dennis James one is called Okay. Dennis James' Lifetime of Firsts by Adam Needif. And proceeds from the book go to the United Cerebral Palsy, which Dennis James was a big advocate of and raised a lot of money for.
Yes. No, and that's wonderful that, celebrities like those, a lot of them gave back. I mean, we can go, of course, one of the big ones, Danny Thomas. Mm-hmm. Of course, Jerry Lewis.
Oh yeah.
Which we all wanted to see the telethon on. Memorial Day. But yeah, no, a lot of them always gave back, and that was something I admired with a lot of the people I worked with, the celebrities that could afford it.
Yeah, definitely. Did you ever get to work any of those telethons yourself as announcer or volunteer behind the scenes?
Actually, I did work one. I can't remember the year. Again, as an audio engineer, over in Marietta. Oh no, Glen Ellen, Glen Helen Park, which is in the Inland Empire, San Bernardino, where the 15 and I think the 210, something like that, come together, just to give you a reference. And we were at Glen Helen Park, and they were bringing celebrities locally in. Casey Kasem was there, and a couple of other people. So yes, I did get a chance to work on at least one show.
That's great. And you got to work with Casey Kasem. Was that your only time you got to work with him, or any other times you got to?
No, that was pretty much the only time he and I worked together. In fact, he didn't really know who I was because, again, I was in the truck, the television truck. But that and he was on the air one time at KEZY in Orange County, and I happened to be doing traffic at that time when he was on. So we worked together then. But again, it wasn't an interactive situation.
Yeah.
One person I did get to work with over the years, and I only bring this up because he just passed recently. Excuse me. Was Vin Scully.
Wow.
I worked with Vin for many years at Dodger Stadium in San Diego. I was, again, an audio engineer, but I could talk to him, and he could talk to me, and we'd see each other in the elevator going up and down to the announce booth, or if I were in the announce booth or something like that. He was just the nicest person. Now, I say that I also had the same repertoire almost with Rick Monday. And Rick, Rick and I, we'd talk a lot. Rick was a great guy as well, or is a great guy. When I was working in San Diego with the Padres, I was also one of the announcers. I did the I did the brought to you by and this, that, and the other thing. But I also landed a part of what they called dot races. Now, there were 3 different races on the scoreboard they did in about the 4th inning. So to keep people entertained. And in San Diego, it was skateboarders. And my thing was, I was the announcer. Cowabunga, dude, here we go. We're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And then, and watch out. And Rick literally hated those interim on the Jumbotron, big screen, whatever you want to call it. And so he mentioned it to me. We're on the air. We're we're between something, or doing a sound check or something. I don't know. And he said, "God, I hate those things. These are terrible." And I hit the button so that I could talk to him. I said, "Rick, you don't like those?" He said, "No, Ed, I do not like them." I said, "Really?" And I said, "Cowabunga, dude." Rick said, "No. Please tell me no." Anytime we were in the elevator together, coming down from the booth or whatever, I'd look at him, I'd smile and say, "Cowabunga, dude." Now, whether he remembers that or not, I don't know, because it was, in the 90s. That's when he was actually with the Padres. He was the announcer there. He was not with the Dodgers yet as an announcer. So. I've been blessed to do a lot of things.
Cowabunga.
Cowabunga, dude.
Yeah, I just don't see something like that ever flying in Los Angeles.
Oh, well, they don't have them anymore. In fact, it was actually illegal gambling.
Oh,
because they expected you to, bet between yourselves as to who was going to win. That's why they had 3 different races, and they called them dot races. They were doing them in San Francisco. They were doing them, in quite a few stadiums. But it was different. Like I say, we were skateboarding. I don't know what the other stadiums were doing.
This is the Talking Archive. My name is Josh Jacobs, and next time we'll conclude our conversation with Ed Mackay.